Welcome into a midweek edition of the Just Basketball Show. I'm Brendon Kleen. That is Chris Manning. We're back after a bunch of Game 5s across the NBA. Warriors and Lakers just wrapped up. We will recap that game as well as all of the others that took place, talk about some of the news, all NBA getting announced, etc. Follow us wherever you're finding this show, whether that's social media, whether that is YouTube, whether that is your favorite podcast platform. Chris, 121, 105 or so. The game is wrapping up as we're hitting record. I think it is an obviously huge win for the Warriors to keep their season alive, but it feels like we have to start with Anthony Davis, who was pretty darn good in the first half, was making a huge impact defensively, and then as the Lakers were trying to make one last push, got hit in like the temple area as he's fighting for a rebound. Goes down, you're not sure what's up. He's talking to a trainer on the bench, and then as we were hitting record, he's taken out of the arena in what sounds like a wheelchair. You never know. We're not going to do any health and medical speculation, but very bizarre set of circumstances under which this game ended, despite obviously feeling pretty good if you're a Warriors fan.
Mark Spears' tweet from the arena says, Lakers center Anthony Davis went to the locker room in a wheelchair after being elbowed in the face. Lakers GM Rob Pelinka and Davis' agent Rich Paul are huddled by the visiting locker room. That is, I'm Googling this and looking around and seeing kind of what other things have happened here. He was taken down to the tunnel during a timeout. Did not look good. Inadvertent shot. This wasn't like a dirty play.
Yeah.
But obviously this hangs over the series now. Brendon, I would have told you coming into this game that the Lakers were in a really optimal spot. They were up 3-1. They still, they're still up 3-2. They got a game at home in Game 6. Their role players will play better, all that stuff. But no Anthony Davis, if that is where this goes, really gets dicey. And the Warriors had a pretty good performance on top of that. This was a vintagey Draymond Green game. They got a lot of good production out of their role players. They didn't need Steph to go out there and score a ton and be everything all the time. So if you're the Warriors, I think you feel pretty good about that. You held on. You kept pushing, and you are the Warriors. So you probably have some confidence that other teams might not have.
Yeah, it's tough because I think Anthony Davis has been such a story of this series. I mean, one thing I hope does not happen is this getting lumped into his other past injuries. Whether he misses any further games in this series or not, it is a fluke. As you said, it was inadvertent. It was not related to anything else going on. So I hope that reputation does not become the whole story, because that's a very lazy way to handle this. But he really was such a huge factor in all of this, and it felt very football to me, Chris, honestly, with the way that Davis was being kind of deployed by the Lakers and how we were watching the Warriors react to that. Like, literally Anthony Davis and where he is on the court on the defensive end when the Lakers are guarding the Warriors has been almost the entirety of the adjustments in this whole series. It's like, okay, who is he on? Do we want him to be involved in the action or do we not? Do we want him to try to get a switch and then drive it from there? Once he's out on the perimeter, do we want it? Like, all these different things. And it honestly, to me, in Game 4 was just super symbolic, this end of the game stretch where he ends up being put on to Andrew Wiggins. And it was just like such this test of not only what Davis is capable of playing free safety defensively, but then also Wiggins as just like the again, symbol of how the Warriors' secondary scorers have just struggled to be consistent in these playoffs. And it was like the best defender playing off of the guy who should be the secondary scorer, and the Lakers winning that game in somewhat surprising fashion. There were obviously a bunch of mistakes by the Warriors down the stretch in Game 4. And then tonight, it felt a little bit less like that. It felt like the Warriors just sort of efforted their way into this win in a lot of ways. You mentioned Draymond. I thought the third quarter was just like peak prime Draymond. This is the most aggressive I've seen him offensively in a very long time. And yeah, nice for Steph to not only not have to play 40 plus minutes, but not even break 30 shot attempts. And it was a little more balanced for them tonight. But Yeah, it's a weird one where you come away and there's all these chess moves, but it's sort of just like, does the big dude play or not? And is he okay?
Yeah, and you just look at how this could. I think there's to start hit on Draymond. He played as the second. I think the second best player on the Warriors. Wiggins had 25, had a really nice game, but they kind of needed this Draymond to just energize them and push and be an irritant and be kind of like peak Draymond in a lot of ways with a little white in the beard, which I personally am a fan of.
Humility.
I don't know if I would go there with Draymond. That guy has confidence, more confidence than I will ever have in my entire life, and I would like to buy that in a bottle and like sip on it if I could. But like he energized them in his 30 minutes. And Clay hasn't played well. He's 2 of 6 from 3, 3 of 12. You're obviously like not counting on Poole anymore, who like we'll talk about him at some point, but brother, I don't know what's going on there. That guy feels kind of out of sorts. Dante DiVincenzo gave you like 13 minutes and like sometimes had the ball in his hands but took one shot. Like that was weird. Like everything with this team is still just like a little bit off, and you're getting like Gary Payton threes and all this stuff. And
I did think Payton and Looney, like they got just enough from them. That was a big part of it too.
Yeah, well, it's like you needed Draymond to do this because it's like we had gestures at other players. Like we need someone to kind of step up and do some things. And even Curry has 27 and 8, only 2 turnovers. A very great passing game from him, but
Another
3 of
one.
11 from. Another one. 3 of 11 from 3 for Curry. So like it's not even like you're getting marksman Curry. You really needed Draymond to be this, and he stepped up and was a very great version of himself with the Warriors season and whatever's coming next straight up on the line.
Yeah, and it's like you look at the Lakers and it's always been this question of which of the other guys will step up. I thought Russell and Reeves were pretty decent in the second half,
Mm-hmm.
I think Russell only took like 4 or 5 shots in the first half, had single-digit points. I think he had, close to 10 in the second half, and, that you'll take that. Reeves is involved in more physical bodies on the floor, questionable foul call moments than like anyone in the league. I know people got mad about the free throws that he drew a lot during the regular season, but it's also like he puts so much pressure on the refs. It's not even like flopping. It's just like very dramatic motion. But when it goes your way, you'll take it. He was a -21, which is a little weird, but they got that secondary output, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. The Lakers did enough. Schroeder had 14 that you would think from the box score, well, they must have won, but it was timely stuff. It was the energy that the Warriors had. And again, I do feel like 7 offensive rebounds from Payton and Looney and 17 combined points from those guys. It's really that simple sometimes. It's all that when Curry doesn't have to score 50 in a game 7 and can just do a little less, things feel a little easier for everybody. Did we learn anything about the style besides Davis? I know that's a crazy thing to say, but do we feel like, I guess what the Warriors did in particular offensively is replicable? Because even if Davis is out, I know that will be a huge lift for the Lakers to try to be competitive. But there's been plenty of times in this postseason where the Warriors have frankly beaten themselves in a lot of ways. Do you feel like this game, with the balanced scoring, was there anything that they could continue to do? Or is it just one of those nights and they'll go home and we'll see what happens?
I'm curious to kind of see some of the pick and roll numbers and see some of like what the numbers kind of tell us about what we saw from the Warriors, because I do feel like they're trending in a certain direction with how they're using Curry, and I think that feels sustainable. And I think just like letting the threes fly to as much as like they will, even like I think makes sense. Like Wiggins should just have a green light. Curry should have this green light. Thompson, even though he's struggling, should have a green light. I think they need to just take a bunch of threes. I think particularly if Davis is healthy and he's able to play, and like we don't know if that's going to happen again, but like that's a path for them. And particularly, you just kind of expect Curry at some point that you just figure some of it out. And
it does feel like he's getting more comfortable. Like that's one thing that I would say is like he's now 4 or 5 games into this series where he's basically being deployed as not just a passer, but definitely looking to pass, again, based on where Davis is on the court, based on, what type of who the screener is that he's getting the screen from and where the help is coming from. You can see him watching the court that way rather than like, I'm going to get my pull-up three off. And I would say that probably has helped. And again, when it is that and his gravity is so strong, you just need 15 to 20 points from a few guys here and there. The Poole thing is interesting to me, Chris, because I understand, he got benched late in game 4. In game 5, he was back in the rotation, obviously, but 5 of 14, like you mentioned, just completely off, completely out of sorts, but they just don't have another ball handler. As crazy as that is, he's the second best ball handler on the team, depending on how you classify Draymond, but you're not going to have him running like ball pick and rolls as a ball handler. Like, he's not that type of guy. So they have to play Poole, and it's just this really bad conundrum. I think they'd be pretty awesomely happy that he was a neutral +0 in the box score tonight. Like, if you can just get 0 out of the Poole minutes, you're feeling like that's a huge victory. He can swing games in the negative direction, I think, for sure, and he's the reason that guys like Moody aren't playing more, even if we feel like they should be.
Yeah. If Jordan Poole was the Jordan Poole we saw last year, I would just feel so much better about what this Warriors team is. And I don't know what's at the root of this with him. I don't know if it's just he's still kind of young and he's having a really down year. I'm sure the punch had something to do with it, but I don't think he's obviously said anything substantial about that and how that's kind of hung over all of this. But they just need one other guy to just take some of the pressure off of Curry. Clay. He's never been a dribbly guy, but he kind of just stands there now. He's just kind of waiting for stuff to happen. Steph also is in this position where, defensively, he's getting put into switches a lot. He's doing a lot of work to hedge and rescreen, and when the war, he's able to kind of fight through some stuff, but that's expelling energy. That is expelling his legs, and that factors in. If he just could have some possessions where he didn't have to carry the ball and dribble and create and do all this stuff, maybe some of these shots go down. Maybe just some of this feels a little bit better for him if that's the case. I don't know, but Poole as just a big 0, and then you're not I'm a DiVincenzo guy. I think he's a good player. I think what he does makes sense, but it's he's not a shot creator for himself in the way that Poole is. And Peyton gave him 27 minutes. Good defender, has really changed some of the D'Angelo Russell stuff in the series in a way that favors the Warriors. That guy's not giving you offense in that same way. That's Steph needs to also create for him and get him going. It's a tightrope for them to walk, and that's why I go back to the Draymond thing. Draymond has to maybe just do this the next 2 games if they're going to win this, whether Davis plays or not. I almost think this is the template of what Draymond has to be and how the energy has to provide and the pace he has to play with.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think the other way that Draymond plays, which is sort of be a post passing hub and wait for things to materialize and get the ball to the right spots and all that stuff, that is really predicated on Clay and Poole being really great as shooters. And if they're not going to be that, then the offense changes. And maybe Draymond doesn't shoot 11 times, but I definitely think that having a little more variety in what he's doing when the ball is in his hands. Is he going to, do those vintage, just sprint charge down court moments that he has? Is he going to maybe change where he's posting up, maybe get a deeper post up, maybe, he has to be more unpredictable because he can't just be somebody that's setting the table for other guys. I was thinking while you were talking about who Anthony Davis, who might play either start in place of him or impact the game in order to make up for his absence if he does have to miss game 6. Where would you look on that Lakers roster?
So
you can't do what Davis does. They're going to play differently, but what's the best case scenario?
What I think has worked for them is very much just been they're playing whatever this version of LeBron's bully ball allows you to do. Mm-hmm. And that is switching and forcing pick and rolls and generating shots and him at least getting at the spots where he hits a midi or he gets to the rim a little bit and just can do something. And I don't know if you saw the look on his face at the end of the game, but I would love to know what's going on in that guy's head right now, and what he's just pinging around in there and what he's thinking about how he has to gear up for this. And I honestly might go Hachimura, just go small. I understand you don't have like another big on this roster that I'm like excited to play. Like, do you want to start Tristan Thompson in a game 6 in 2023? I do not.
No, I think
I'm
if
good.
they wanted to go big, the problem, like you're saying,
It'd be
is
Gabriel. It'd be Wayne Gabriel. But then
It would
it's
be
like,
Gabriel.
okay, but it's like also that's not at all providing you stuff. I think where you're gonna have to get, and defensively this is really hard. It's like I think you're just gonna have to be like, if AD misses a game, our path is we try to drag the pace as slow as we can. And LeBron, we lean into whatever version of bully ball LeBron can give us, and we just put shooters and screens, and just has to be that way. And he might play 42 minutes, and his foot might be limiting him in those minutes, even when he plays well. But that to me is kind of the path, because I don't see a way to continue playing big with the roster they have. Like they don't have even like a competent real backup center just to like throw in there and give them like 10 minutes. Like they just don't. That's not what this roster has, and that's a problem. And it's if AD's out, like you're never going to replace AD. There's like very few you don't get a player as good as AD to back up AD or someone who could replicate AD. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
But you don't even have like they don't have like we have this whole conversation coming about centers and like what like DeAndre Ayton is in the show, right? They don't have like Jock Landale to just like throw in there and like play hard and do stuff. They don't have freaking Bismack Biyombo to go in there and like kind of do that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think the real problem from a skill set standpoint, the most irreplaceable thing as far as what the Lakers have on their roster and what Davis is as a player is rim protection. Mm-hmm. They don't have anyone else on the roster who can protect the rim. Like Vanderbilt is tall, but he's a wing defender. He's not a shot blocker.
Or he's defending Curry.
Yeah, exactly. A wing defender, like somebody who's out there to be a perimeter stopper. Like that's really what he's there for. And same thing with a lot of these guys. Even like Hachimura has theoretical defensive upside. Troy Brown Jr. is a guy who's played defense. He's not even a big. Wenyen Gabriel I think is just too small. If Draymond posts him up, for instance, like it's already over. Kevon Looney's going to eat his lunch on the glass. Tristan is just, I don't think, ever going to touch the court or shouldn't. It's just not been. How long since he even played a meaningful basketball game, right?
He did get to post his like dunk the other day on his Instagram, so good for him.
Great for him, but I think in conclusion, you're probably right. Their best chance, and they switched a lot more in Game 5 than they had been. So probably play your wing heavy lineups. Try to just switch everything. I mean, they played LeBron at the 5 last season a lot when Davis was out. Dip back into that a little bit. See if you can just sort of contain the ball. Off-ball switch to contain the screening stuff that the Warriors do. Try to play sound transition defense. And probably play a slower half-court style offensively and see if you can win a game in the 90s or something. But I think a road game 6. Oh no, sorry, it's a home game 6. I don't see it for them if Davis can't play.
And then you get into Game 7.
LeBron versus Curry Game 7. The NBA is gonna just start printing the money already. They have a call put into the United States Treasury because the bills aren't gonna. There's not enough dollar bills on the planet for how much they're gonna rake in for that game on a weekend. I don't care about the riches of Adam Silver by any means, but that's gonna be huge. All right, that'll wrap us up for this segment. We're gonna dive into All NBA and the rest of these Game 5s after Jake's little song. I'm gonna skip past some of the coaching stuff and go right to All NBA teams because we're not sure who these coaches are gonna be. There's JJ Redick getting an interview, which is crazy.
Here's all we need to say about the coaching stuff.
Give me your take.
I have 2 takes on the coaching stuff. The Coach K got hired by the league, whatever. Don't care about that really. Kenny Atkinson to the Bucks would make some sense to me, but like it feels just sort of like you're trying to replace like the Mike Budenholzer like size shape you just threw through the wall a little bit, right?
Like guy.
Yeah, so I don't exactly that's kind of interesting to me that's on the radar, but we'll see if he even gets the job. This JJ Redick thing is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Like
People pointed out Doc Rivers, and I actually didn't know that history. Did you realize Doc got hired to be a head coach right out of basically having just retired and then doing a little bit of media. And then he was coach of the year, like his second season as an NBA coach, because he led the Magic to a shocking playoff berth. I didn't know that was a thing. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can be proven wrong. But yeah, I wouldn't be hiring like a podcaster to be my head coach.
I really wish we could make that a social graphic, but maybe we shouldn't.
It's not disrespectful to JJ. It's just, I think there's some better options out there.
Here's what I just
let
don't
the dude get an
understand.
assistant job before you interview him, maybe.
Yeah, going from like having like DraftKings sponsorships to like NBA head coach, and also again like this. And look, let's just say it: we are two white guys. JJ Redick is a white guy who'd be cutting in front of a lot of skilled black assistant coaches who have been in the league a lot longer, and former players at that. Sam Cassell comes to mind as someone who has not got a head coaching opportunity, but after putting in the work, and then he just gets there is nothing. That's just like why? Like, what is the point of this?
Yeah,
like,
I think that's an accurate
like
capper on. I mean, we'll see. It does feel like Toronto is hiring, kind of like looking high and low. So I almost wonder if it's a little bit of like bravado, like, and we're even gonna interview this dude. You know what I mean?
Sports teams do dumb things. The Cleveland Browns, for instance, once interviewed Condoleezza Rice to run the franchise. Like, okay, like I'm not saying that sports teams are like inherently very smart. I just kind of expect better out of Masai Ujiri.
Sure. Well, if they hire him, then maybe we can be critical. But there's also something to be. I mean, like, hey, if JJ does have any interest in coaching, then it would be nice to be the first team to ever talk to him. I'm sure that'll help. If he ever is like a hot commodity guy, if that's the direction he chooses to go, it'll be pretty nice to be like, well, we interviewed with you way back when. So smart teams do stuff like this, but if they hired him, then I think it'd be time to pounce. Let's get to.
We also just would be, I will just say I'm a very big fan of the Old Man and the Three, and like I would also not like that to be taken out of my podcast rotation, selfishly.
Yeah, no,
it's a very good show.
I want player interviews, and no one else is doing those at that level.
I also want like someone to just do the smart thing, which like I don't know why more people don't do this. We would do this if we could get him, but it's like give me an hour of Tim Legler just like talking hoops. Mm-hmm. That stuff's awesome. He's really smart. It's just like this. I saw that, Brendon, and it was like the first time in this Twitter era of like no check marks that I was like, am I getting duped?
Is this real?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll talk. I thought the Pistons coach was going to get hired today. I thought there was a bunch of Pistons people saying May 10th was the day. That did not happen, but I think that'll be the first domino, and we'll start to see some of these playoff teams exit, and maybe they'll make changes. But the coaching carousel is swinging around right now for sure. Let's go on to All NBA though, where Chris, it kind of feels like chalk in a way. I didn't see anything that really made me gasp or jaw drop or really even bat an eye, to be honest with you. I think I'll give you the floor if you have anything that did surprise you, but I was going to use this opportunity primarily to sing the praises one more time of our Lord and Savior, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the crown prince of the Just Basketball show, because the dude got All NBA first team in like his fifth season, and he's one of the only guys that young, I think he's 24, to ever do that. That was the thing that I got most excited about, but I know that's not the headliner.
No, I mean, I went there as well. I think Curry a second team is really interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Because I think by numbers, like if you just looked at those and you looked at the film, it's like, yeah, that's probably like a first team guard, if we're being honest, right? Like this is one of the best players in the world, had a great season, but like 56 games, and like it's like that. This will just not be a thing next year, right? Like that is where my brain went. I found myself thinking about this so much, and what would this look like a year from now when we have these rule changes, when we have the games requirements difference, and you will have guys not eligible, and you will have these like when's the next time we see a third center on like All NBA, right? Like I am very curious to see where all of this will go. Steph, to me, just add 56 games with the resume is where my brain kind of went in thinking about that. Brent, he was like one of the like best players in expected wins this year, and it's just like, oh, he played 56 games, ineligible.
Yeah, I mean, I think even when we were going back and forth on it, I had Steph every time we would check in, and I think you always just sort of made the point like, it's unlikely he gets in. I think he closed the season healthy, and so that helped him at least get into the threshold where he was going to be considered. I tend to think that whoever Zach Lowe votes gets like 15 additional votes, to be honest with you, because I think there's a lot of lazy beat writers out there. And Zach Lowe had him second team, so I think that probably went a long way.
Is Zach Lowe like the New Hampshire primary
Yes,
of the All-NBA?
He should write. Well, I think he writes his column the day that votes are due, or even after that. So it's not like, I guess, that he forecasts it so much, but he talks about the stuff on his show and all that. So I feel like more often than not, as the years go by, it feels like his ballot tends to be very close to reality. And I don't know if it's a bunch of other people doing the same exact homework as he is, or just them all piling onto what he's doing. But I had the same note as you. Bobby Marks had 5 players that he tallied for this, Chris, that would not have been eligible under the new rules who made it this year. 5 players, which is crazy. And my note on my side of things was just, we are all going to be so angry this time next year when the game requirement teams drop. Like, I'm just going to call them the game requirement teams now, because all NBA, it's almost like all NBA with an asterisk at this point. And I hope it doesn't affect things as much as it feels like it's going to, but we already get mad about snubs, and now you're just painting another reason to get mad about snubs in there for, in my opinion, no reason. Especially because it's all good when it's load management and we can all, get in arguments about that, but it's also a completely separate thing. What if somebody gets injured for 23 games next year and plays 59?
I mean, look,
that sucks. Why should they get punished?
Well, and Brendon, I've been thinking about this in the context of Devin Booker. As someone who has converted to your religion, the Church of Devin Booker.
Well, we'll get to that. I mean, you can maybe don't go to church this week.
Nah, I'm still going. The Nuggets just had a good game plan to kind of wearing him a little bit. But like that guy, to me, like if he had actually played like 65 games, like that's a first team All NBA guard. Like,
yeah,
that guy's
I mean,
ridiculous.
if you're taking kind of games out of it, really, I think you probably would have gone Booker, Lillard, and Curry as some combination in your top 3. I know there's only 2 per team, but those would have been the 3 guys vying for the top spot. Maybe still Mitchell and SGA in there as well, but I think the 3 most outstanding, like college basketball does it, like the most outstanding guards this year were those 3, in my opinion, and just they didn't kind of play competitive basketball enough to be in that conversation. And like they already get docked. Like this is sort of evidence, right? Like Booker didn't make it, Curry didn't get first team, Lillard got third team. We already have the mechanisms to like filter this stuff out when guys don't play enough. I think we're all adults and could have figured it out on our own, but the NBA decided to lay the smack down a little bit here, and it might suck, but whatever. It's not that big of a deal. It's just gonna leave even more snubs, like I said.
The other thing where my brain went to, Brendon, is just the money part of this, because Ja doesn't make All NBA. You're in a position there. So the Ja thing happens there. And the Jaylen Brown one is the big one. And, like, the contracts for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who also kind of locked in Supermax eligibility, Brown being the more immediate one, these are the GDPs of small countries for 2 players. Like that, like the contracts the Celtics could hand out are the
for
GDPs
a team that just lost
countries.
this game 5. Like that's the funniest part of all of this on this week for it to happen, right?
Yeah. The contracts the Celtics could hand out are among, will just be, and like we're just headed there we could be headed there in different ways with other teams in the future. Like this just feels like the first in an era, but these numbers, Brendon, are just monstrous.
Yeah, I saw somebody point that out to kind of wrap it with SGA again. Salute to the king, but he is locked into a non-Rose rule or whatever we're calling that rule now. All NBA before your rookie extension kicks in. So he's not on the biggest type of deal. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty interesting to me, just in the way that the Thunder are going to continue to build, because they're going to have a lot of young guys. They're going to be hoping that, Chet and whoever they get this year and whatever, Jalen Williams, are all making a lot of money. And so it might really end up being a benefit to them to have Shai, who's already this good, on a below market deal. Maybe the GDP of like a tiny country versus a small country. I don't know how the math breaks down on that, but I have a game for us to play if we're done with the news here.
Yeah, I don't have any other real strong All NBA takes. I'm curious to see. Julius Randle in retrospect is funny, but like he had a good regular season, so okay.
It's funny too to me. Speaking of the humor of this, that are we surprised that Jimmy Butler did this in the playoffs, or is he second team All NBA? I feel like that kind of got lost. I know we all have been heaping praise on Jimmy, and he's 56 points in a playoff game is out of this world. I'm not going to take that away from him, but the dude had his best regular season this year. So it's kind of crazy the response that he's been getting and the playoff history that he already had. I feel like there's a lot of element of surprise with this Butler run that feels a little bizarre to me. I guess they lost tonight, which we'll get to, but Jimmy's been doing this, and second team All NBA is a much deserved honor for him that in hindsight will look even better, because if he hadn't made these teams and then people were looking through his playoff box scores, people would have been incredibly confused. Future NBA fans who scour the internet, which is what I did. And we'll transition to the game right here. I have a question for you that I did not realize myself, Chris. Did you know that Basketball Reference recently put high school box scores onto the website?
No, but that's incredible.
So that was the inspiration behind this game. As far as I can tell, there's only 3 players who have gotten this honor bestowed upon them so far. I would imagine it's a project that they're undergoing with a lot of players, I would hope, and we can talk about who else we want to see. Which players do you think that they did, since you don't know? And that'll be the game. It's not so much of a game as a list. I have my 5 top high school box scores that I could track down on Basketball Reference. That's the very professional name for this list. Who are the 3 players, if I just asked you to guess who they would have put up first? What would your instinct be?
These are active players?
No, they're 3 players from throughout history who had prolific high school and college careers and are, legendary players that Basketball Reference apparently is putting a bunch of extra stats up for.
LeBron?
Yes.
Kobe?
Yes. The last one is Jordan. So not quite like a prep to pro guy.
Where my brain went, the 3 that I was thinking in my head before I would have guessed would have been, it was going to be between Kareem, MJ, and then one of Magic or Bird. That would have been like my 3 if it wasn't those, just because like Magic and Bird in that, and you go back, get a little bit, but Jordan makes sense for the North Carolina part of it.
Yeah, and just in the spirit of people are going to be looking up Michael Jordan on Basketball Reference, I understand why they would go with him. They also have been putting like McDonald's All-American games, preseason, like they are scouring the internet for this stuff. It's very cool. But yeah, since you answered the question of who you would want to see them add next, which is going to be how I wrap this, I had Kareem. That would be awesome. He's apparently like the most legendary high school athlete that has ever walked the planet, is what the stories seem to indicate. And then Kevin Garnett would be the other one for me.
Yeah, another one.
Another prep to pros guy who was pretty sick apparently in his day. Amari Stoudemire would be a good one from a Phoenix standpoint because I'm a homer, but all right, so my list is, again, top 5 high school box scores that I could track down on Basketball Reference.
So I would want Cheryl Miller.
Okay, well, no, so I have, like, box score stats, but keep going on who you would want. No. So, I want you to keep going.
Okay. Cheryl Miller, just because, yeah. I kind of want, in this moment, I want, Caitlin Clark's. I just want to see, if she's putting up
Did you see the clips going around of when she was, 14 on the internet the other day?
Yeah.
Those were great.
Just ridiculous. Kind of want to see what Steph's high school numbers were like. I want to see what Lenny Cook's high school numbers were.
Oh.
Let's go, a little differently. And then Sebastian Telfair. Give me I want 2 weird ones. I want 2 esoteric kind of off the beaten path, not just so I can go back and guys who didn't work out for whatever reason kind of things. Bill Walton would also be one, just to see what was Bill Walton up to in high school. Besides,
I thought of Bill Russell because he was another one of those that was supposed to be just legendary. Back when people were multi-sport athletes and basketball was just one thing they did, and they would get off the track and go drop 60 out of nowhere. He was supposed to be. I mean, one of those
Wilton, I just Googled Wilt real quick, and so the first thing in his high school career, As an average track and field athlete, Chamberlain high jumped 6 feet 6 inches, ran the 440 yards in 49 seconds in the 880 and 153, shot putted 53 feet 4 inches, and long jumped 22 feet. That seems pretty good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, use sports specialization. I mean, we're not sports scientists here, but it seems pretty bad. Like, let kids mess around and be athletic and have fun, and then let them, go pro when they're 18, not 8. But all right, so here's the 5 that I could find. All right, number 5, Kobe Bryant goes for 26, 17, and 10 triple double in his sophomore year of high school in a win. These are all wins. Number 4. Kobe Bryant, 40 points in 3 quarters in January of, I believe, his junior year. The top 3 are great. Number 3, Michael Jordan, 37 points and 17 made field goals. So that's just like all 2s. In a win on February 3rd, 1981, which I believe was his junior year. He also, this was kind of a funny thing to go and look back, because there's all those legacy, the legendary stories about how he was on JV and got cut and whatever. Very much embellished, but if you look back, these box scores are here now. He sucked in his freshman and sophomore, like the last game of the year, whenever they would have gone out in like the state tournament. He was pretty awful, which is kind of funny to look back on and actually have data for. And then number 2, Kobe Bryant goes for 50 points in his final high school home game, February 21st, 1996. It just made me think of the last game at Staples when, what did he score, 60 in that game?
Mm-hmm.
It was just part 1 of that, and we didn't know. And then LeBron, number 1. LeBron goes for 50 points, 11 threes made, and 9 rebounds in the spring of his final high school season, right before he was about to get drafted. 50 points. I wanted it to be higher than that, I'm not going to lie. But then I was reminding myself, high school games are very chaotic and short compared to college and the NBA. So what are you going to do? But I wanted like 80, 18, and 15. It didn't pop up that way.
Yeah, high school numbers are weird, and some places don't have the shot clock.
Yeah. Well, especially probably with Jordan, I wouldn't be surprised if things were a little different rule-wise. All right, let's get to this Knicks Heat Game 5, Chris, which 112-103, the Knicks come from the dead. They score 14 points in the first quarter and somehow win this game. Jalen Brunson figured some things out. 7 assists, 1 turnover, 38 points on 50+% shooting, got to the line 12 times. Probably not a coincidence that he got some help from both R.J. Barrett and Julius Randle. We're going back to Miami for Game 6. I would feel pretty confident saying it ends that day, but crazier things have happened. What are your vibes on this series after a New York win?
I don't think anything has really changed, right?
Yeah.
I think the Heat have really just flat out put the Knicks where the Cavs were in round 1. It just feels like watching the Heat just bump and grind and be physical. It's just they missed a ton of really open shots in Game 5. Brunson was great, and it's just okay, the Knicks get one. I'm not super surprised about that. I don't feel any particularly different. I kind of just expect the Heat to go home and win in 6, and we're looking at Miami and Philly if things kind of project the way they are right now. That feels like where this is headed. There's nothing in this game, particularly just because the Heat came back, right? I didn't see Tibbs adjustments or anything that really altered the flow of the game. It's just I think the Heat missed a bunch of shots, and then they came back and they just probably had too big of a deficit to really come back with the way they play.
Yeah, they were down 5 or less, and Duncan Robinson had that wide open transition 3 that missed. Some different things go back and forth in different ways, and you could easily be saying Miami won this game. I kind of feel like it was a disappointment that they didn't just hit the gas after that first quarter. That first quarter was a little fluky, though. I think it was a number of second chance and transition points that Miami was just able to kind of get. To me, really the biggest indicator that the Heat aren't really worried about this, though, Chris, is Jimmy Butler only took 12 shots. Yeah. It's if he was pressed, I think we might have seen that number get over 20, but he was all right, you can have your home game. We'll take this back to Miami and get the job done. I've been wanting to talk about R.J. Barrett, though, and this feels like a good opportunity because he was pretty solid in this game, and he, maybe this will be the last chance we get to talk about the Knicks in depth. He's getting to the rim more this playoffs than any since his rookie regular season. He's at 34% from deep, 44% from mid-range. Nothing elite, but better than he has been. And he's getting to the line at a really high level. This is the guy that I brought up when we were talking about Jaylen Brown the other day. And to me, RJ is a great example of somebody who has just figured out a way to play their own game. And it's this lesson that we learn a lot of, like, rather than expecting guys to suddenly be great, he's not going to be able to go right. Ever. He's just not going to be able to go right. You know what I mean? And he's not going to be a good pull-up three-point shooter. He's going to have some question mark decisions. His defense, maybe you're always going to be wanting a little bit more. Maybe he's not worth his contract. But he's at least been an impactful player in these playoffs and far more consistent than he had been. And I at least feel like, the Knicks have some questions to sort out. I don't feel like RJ Barrett is like emergency mayday, need to find a trade because this guy is falling apart, i.e. Jordan Poole,
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to him. He was part, I think, Brendon, of like how they turned it around against Cleveland, right? Like I think part of the reason the Knicks figured it out was Barrett had a couple bad games, and then I thought he really stepped it up. He really started getting a little more in the rhythm. He got downhill. He was making impact on these things. And I think if you're the Knicks, you feel pretty good about that. I think if you feel good about how he comes out of the series as a guy to play off of Brunson, doesn't need to be the ball handler, but has acquitted himself pretty well and is pretty aggressive too, right? Like this is a guy that has stayed pretty consistently downhill and playing within himself ever since those first couple poor games. And if you're looking at a way to kind of look at him going forward and like, okay, what is this guy going to be? Where is he headed? How do we feel about him? I would feel pretty good about that if I were them based on him coming out of what we've seen. I still think that the Knicks question to me is, okay, how do they star hunt still? That to me is still where this is going. But if you could be in a world where you get to keep him as part of that thing as either like an asset for the future or someone you just have as like your third, fourth option on offense and can help kind of carry your offense when one of your better players sits, that feels like a really adequate role for what RJ Barrett seems to be based on these playoffs.
Yeah, and he's still pretty young, right? I mean, that was always one of the things with him back when he was drafted is he was, I think, the youngest player in that draft, and he's still not even 23. So these strides, especially to do it on a playoff stage, feel pretty promising to me. And yeah, you could see him from a salary standpoint, knowing that the Knicks will inevitably be involved in whatever superstars become available. Could he be the Lauri Markkanen salary piece in a mega trade? Yeah, of course. Like I think that's part of what gets lost in the Randall conversation or in the Barrett conversation about that contract last summer is like, yeah, you're overpaying, but maybe you're ballooning that so that you can aim a little higher from a salary standpoint when you inevitably look for a trade like that. I don't think that's a bad way to handle things because it's not like they had anybody else to pay, right? So you give him the money, watch him continue to develop, and you always have that trade thing in your back pocket. But yeah, I mean, I just think he's been solid, which is really all you can ask for somebody that despite being in our lives and going to Duke and being in the biggest market in the country and everybody, roughing with him for his whole career so far is still a work in progress who's shown steps of improvement. I don't know. Is that naive or pansy-ish of me to praise that? I mean, I just think it's solid. Solid's mostly all you can ask for with a lot of these guys.
No, look, I think so. I think that's right, but I also think sometimes we view things in like one way, and it's like the guy could easily bounce back and like have another thing. Like I mean, like for all we know, Jordan Poole's like going to be fine, but like RJ Barrett, I would have thought a couple months ago was like in a weird spot, and it's like he's fine. Maybe like guys like Jordan Poole turned it around. Maybe someone who had a really great playoffs this year fades. Like unless you're like these elite guys, the year-to-year consistency is just not always going to be there. I think sometimes we don't bake that in with some of how we talk about this stuff. It's like this stuff is going to vacillate. This stuff is going to go up and down. That's how life works. That is how players work. That like things are going to come in waves and come and go. Like there's going to be a series at some point, Brendon, where like RJ Barrett like is in a playoff series and he just like goes cold, and like that's going to happen, and we're going to be like, oh, is RJ Barrett a bad fit? But like if you nuancedly look at it, that's great. There's a player actually in this that's not Jordan Poole in that Lakers-Warriors series that I want to talk about in that context when we get to that series later. But Barrett's like the perfect example of this. Like he's not good enough to just be consistent every single night. Even Jalen Brunson is just not that in the playoffs. He's had a couple off nights. Yeah. That happens. That just happens.
Yep. Yeah, last thing on this for me would be salute to Quentin Grimes. That steal that he had on Butler after getting railroaded by a screen, and then he pops up and makes like the biggest defensive play of the game on one leg. I love Quentin Grimes. I feel like he is Josh Hart gets, the Nick stuff thrown around like he's the most stereotypical Nick that there ever could be, and so glad he found his home and this and that. Quentin Grimes just got the Tibbs treatment in a must-win game 5, playing all 48 minutes and looked like he was about to collapse afterward and still made that play. So he is a tried and true Nick as well. And we'll see what happens in game 6. I think this series is going to be ugly throughout. So again, like you were saying, nothing about this necessarily changes a lot about how we feel. Let's go on to the other Eastern Conference game, though. Celtics, Sixers, game 5. I mentioned crazy surprise outcomes at the very top of the show. This certainly qualifies. Philadelphia, the process, one of the most laughed at NBA franchises in recent memory, went on the road in Boston and won a game 5 to take control of that series. They will be home on Thursday to potentially close it out. Joel Embiid was great. Tyrese Maxey was great. Harden was in facilitator mode and efficient. And they outcompeted and sort of just dismantled a Boston team that everyone picked to win the finals, even before Milwaukee went out.
I want to start with James Harden in a weird way because I want to give him, again, some credit. He has had some really great performances in this series. Game 1, another game later in the series. In this game, he's hitting mid-rangers, which he doesn't hit a ton of. It felt like he was dialing those up more and more and more. We are seeing him facilitate and fit in these roles. He's been really malleable in this series. And they're just this is one of the best. This is the best Harden playoff series in a long time. This just is. Harden has been kind of what exactly Philly needed him to be. And they needed him to have that game 1 where he takes over for Embiid in game 4. They needed those two things. They needed this Harden to hit mid-rangers, to facilitate, to set up Embiid, to be just kind of there. Really kudos to him. If they hang on here and win, he deserves a ton of praise. He will be maybe arguably the MVP of the series for them to me. He has been that important, I think, to what they've been.
I was thinking about the way that those two guys with him and Embiid have fit together and figured one another out so quickly. And I was thinking about duos. And obviously off the top, I would say Murray and Jokic. It's not much of a competition there. And then Draymond and Steph, I think would be right there in terms of making one another better, being so symbiotic together that they kind of can't imagine them apart. You can't imagine one of them being as good without the other. Maybe Jokic, that's not fair to say, but those two guys are one and the same. But after those two duos, I really think that I might pick Harden and Embiid. And that's pretty crazy to say considering that he was just traded to Philly in February of last year. And, there were a lot of open questions about whether that dude was going to be able to adapt his game and set his big man up and take mid-range jumpers if he's playing more pick and roll than he used to, and all these things that he's just sort of done. And now, the kick out to the strong side corner when Jaylen Brown helped off for whatever reason in game 4, and the two-man game numbers that they flashed all season, it just feels like you're going to get a pretty great shot if you run a side pick and roll or a top-of-the-key pick and roll with either of those guys ending up scoring the ball.
Well, and it's just interesting that they're such a different pace than those other duos are kind of hitting at there, right? Curry and Draymond can go at light speed. They can go really quick and really decisive and attack you in these different ways. Jokic and Murray is basketball is jazz, kind of in pick and roll form because it's all over the place. It is them reacting and feeding off each other, and it's inverted because of what Jokic is and what Murray is. That is its one-of-one kind of unique thing. Harden and Embiid is at its own pace because those two guys love to play slow. They're very methodical. They're both kind of bruising. They both are just kings of footwork and knowing how to be in the right spots and kind of maximizing every little angle they have. It is a different flavor, but I think you're dead on to put it with those ones. It is one of those duos where it's that pick and roll is just nearly unguardable if you're kind of trying to build the defense to stop. You can, but it's seeing how Embiid in when he came in the best game of the series for him against Boston in game 5 was you get him in spots and it's it felt like every time he's either getting fouled or he's scoring. And it's like if he missed, you're lucky. But everything else, it was fully in his control. And Harden's often the one setting him up. Harden is the one also settling in with him there, which is kind of a funny place for Harden to be. Because if you go back to Houston, one of the reasons we got the version of Houston Harden that we got was that he like kind of got sick of playing with Dwight Howard as like a rim rolling lob center, and now he's with Embiid, and it's like he fits with that kind of player really well.
It seems like he does, and it is the Dwight parallel is a little bit funny, although I think Embiid's ability to kind of hit that mid-range jumper, be a playmaker himself, and be the second
actually,
piece of that, right?
Embiid actually should be given post-ups, whereas like Dwight had like a really great apex, but it was not like, hey, we should like run our entire offense through him and at the elbow and like let him hit like pull-up jumpers and stuff.
Yeah.
So there is a difference. Like there is a difference.
But I was also going to mention, too, the stubbornness that he had with even Chris Paul and to an extent Russell Westbrook, right, where he started to gain this reputation of, somebody who was not fun to play with, somebody who wanted these stars to come to his team and then wasn't really able to adapt successfully to actually be great with them. I think you can poke holes in that a little bit, but that was obviously what kind of stuck with him. And now it's like, yeah, he's sort of doing the epitome of that. He's taking 10 shots, in a playoff game and getting 10 assists. To me, I don't necessarily know what to make of it. I want to say that the Nets experience maybe changed his mentality. I mean, that's kind of what I've felt like watching him evolve this year is like he had that Brooklyn experience and he was like, okay, well, I sort of chased the ultimate star-laden super team thing, and that wasn't super satisfying either. I keep getting injured, and whatever clicked, he's very much clearly embracing the sacrifice that it's going to take, and he can turn on the scoring, I guess, when he needs to. I think there's still going to always be some doubt the further on that they go that he's actually going to continue to do that, but they've aced every test facing them. I found this stat. This is the first time, if my mouse scroller will work, the first time in franchise history that the Sixers won a road game 5 in a series tied 2-2 ever. Like this is huge. And if you're talking about duos, I feel like we got to go to the Celtics side, and those guys were just not good enough. Tatum had a bad first half. I think he rebounded well, and then Brown was taken out of the game for long stretches by PJ Tucker and missed a bunch of free throws. I know they scored 60 points, but it wasn't really efficient overall, and obviously they get a home loss. Like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to say other than that was really disappointing.
Do you go more on what is happening with Boston, more to what's going on with the coaching, or more what is happening with the players?
I'm always going to lean players because I just think the coaching stuff gets pretty overblown. I really have a hard time imagining that what explains this is just Udoka down to Mazzulla. I know that, Celtics fans are very keyed into Mazzulla and his weaknesses, but I think the fact that he's 34 and whatnot goes a long way in affecting that. I mean, if he was some coaching assistant lifer who made the same decisions, I don't think that conversation would be the same. I think it's easy because he's young and the craziness with Udoka. To me, the thing that I was thinking on a lot after this loss, Chris, is these random offenses. I know that Marcus Smart made the comment last week about how a lot of their offense is random and got kind of clowned because that's what we do on social media. But if you look at it, Boston, Milwaukee, Big Bud thing, random offense. He's like the number one guy with that in the league. And Taylor Jenkins with Memphis, who is a disciple of Bud, tried to run a random offense when he first got to Memphis, and I think that they've actually gotten a little more structured as time has gone on. I think that's really been to the benefit of somebody like Jaren Jackson, for instance, who was just jacking up all sorts of crazy shots when he first got drafted by them.
Sure.
But those are three teams whose offenses have not performed up to the standard that they set for themselves in the regular season, and two of them are already gone from the playoffs. One of them is on its way out. I know there's principles. I feel like random offense has some bad PR, if I'm being honest with you, because the name doesn't do you any favors there. It makes it seem like you're just kind of like trying shit. But it had me thinking of if that sort of philosophy of just like, let's get talented guys with high IQs and just take the first good shot and all that type of stuff might be some detractors in the coaching circles after this postseason with how things have gone for those three teams.
I think there is something to like having like core principles, and sometimes it feels like with Boston, like there is not like these core principles. Like if you can say anything positive about like Miami, let's just use Philly as a better example because they're in that series. We kind of know what Philly's going to do with Embiid and with Harden, and it's like that's the core of everything you do. Tatum and Brown like kind of should be that, but it doesn't feel like there's like just structure to like how they're supposed to run things into the games. It almost ends up being like Marcus Smart is the one like putting himself in those spots, and it's like I like Marcus Smart. That's been a really impactful player for you, but that is not like what Marcus Smart should be doing in the context of this team. And it's like the I don't know how they. I think they reflect on Missoula a ton, but this isn't just like a Missoula issue. It was a Udoka issue to some degree, and it was a Brad Stevens thing too. So like, is this the players? Like, is it just the continuity of what has gone on there? It just has built and built and built, and it kind of felt like Brendon, like Game 5 was the crescendo of that because they just were kind of rudderless the entire time at home, and there was nothing they could do to like snap themselves back into it. Nothing they could do to snap themselves into a spot where it's like, okay, we're fine. We're back. Like we understand this went wrong. We understand that we're in a tough spot now. But instead, it was like we're just never coming back here, and we're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I don't know what really to make of it. It makes me think of the Clippers too. I know I mentioned the Bucks and the Grizzlies. The other team it makes me think of is the Clippers, and I wonder if the conversation this offseason, I'm not saying Boston's out. I think they could easily. I don't think a team that experienced in the playoffs is going to be frightened out of their shoes to go play in Philadelphia. And that's not even an insult to Philadelphia. It's just like a road playoff game. They've seen that a million times, But if they lose, even if they just, let's say, don't win the championship, which I don't feel great about given that they've, struggled in both series now. The Clippers thing was always like they need a point guard, right? They need somebody to set the table because two wings being the primary ball handlers, especially considering if you're a wing in the NBA and you're a great player, odds are you're doing quite a bit on defense too. I think it just became a little bit untenable. We might never even know if that was actually what the Clippers needed because they haven't been able to stay healthy long enough to test any of that. But I think that might be what we end up seeing with Boston, and I feel like partially the same thing we see with Marcus Morris, who also coincidentally played for the Celtics at the beginning of this era, being overused within that Clippers offense, and like, why is he taking so many shots? What's going on? Why does Ty Lue keep playing him? I think the Marcus Smart thing is a little bit similar. It's like the answer to me is because they can do enough different types of things offensively that they end up being relied upon more than maybe they should because they are just the guy who can at least handle the ball and create a shot, even if it's not a high-value one. Whereas besides Tatum and Brown, and even those guys rely on or fall into some bad habits at times, it's a lot of guys just jacking shots, And it's like if I'm Marcus Smart, I'm like, all right, I'm putting an end to this, even if that's not the most efficient way to actually go about doing that. I get it at a certain point. It's like I'm going to put the ball on the ground and drive to the basket because somebody needs to do something different right now, and it's not getting done,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the solution is because they're a super talented team, but it's just like at a certain point, something's got to change.
It's funny to me, too, that like some of these issues happen with these teams that we would argue maybe have the best, most complete rosters in the league. Like this is a Boston thing with that roster that I love. That I think I said, oh, this papers over a lot of their issues, and I kind of feel wrong about that now, particularly with how Robert Williams just like isn't a factor for them right now, and like how much of a zero he's been for them. And then I look at the Clippers, and it's like that roster. Obviously, it's dependent on the health of those two top guys, in particular Kawhi, that just hasn't been there, but that roster also just like hasn't overcome like some of these things that we're talking about. And then you see like a team like it's like Miami and Philly and Denver and these teams that are like even the Lakers like know exactly what they are. And they're taking control of some of this stuff, and they're running these principles, and it's getting them places. That is maybe the lesson to learn with all this. It's just like you kind of have to have some bankable things. And if I'm the Celtics, I kind of want more out of Tatum in that way. Like if there's like a knock on Tatum now, it's like I wonder if Tatum has to kind of just hit a level of assertiveness that we haven't seen from him in this context yet.
Yeah, I mean, you watch like to bring up yet another comparison. You watch the Heat, right? And like they run a somewhat similar type of thing to what Boston does, with mostly the wings and forwards being the initiators and the guards almost just being shooters in a lot of ways, right? But with them, I think the ball moves better, first and foremost. But I also think that Jimmy Butler is just a guy who can make something happen no matter what the flow of a possession is, right? He can post up. He can get a mid-range jumper off. He, in the playoffs, starts taking threes and making them, He, in this series against the Knicks, has been a great playmaker because they're just doubling him, and he's like taunting them in press conferences, keep sending the doubles, I'll just keep getting double-digit assists. And he has an answer for all that stuff because his game's well-rounded enough. I think that's really where we are with Tatum. It's so weird for a shot maker of his caliber to have that stand in the way. Like, even though we all know basketball demands that you kind of have answers for every little thing, and you have to have the pieces fit right. Like, we learned that lesson time and again. I just watch Tatum, and I think we all almost like watch him and we're like, yeah, but the talent should just wipe some of that away. And I guess the reality is it doesn't, or at least on that particular roster, he doesn't have the right types of supporting players to make it paper over, and his weaknesses end up being like a real difference maker for their team. And he's just not always efficient enough. I mean, that's the easy thing, right? He just needs to make more shots.
Yeah, I there's times where like I want the Celtics to just like maybe get a couple of mid-rangers and just like kind of like get something a little more inside, just instead of being like, let's just settle for the three.
Yeah,
like
from Malcolm Brogdon maybe too, because he takes those. But
yeah, shout out to but it's like I'm looking up where they are right now in the playoffs as far as like their mid-range rates, but it's just like, so in the playoffs, team stats, like and that's the thing. Tatum should be able to get off, right? Like Tatum should be able to just be a guy that gets some of that off. So this year, Brendon, in the regular season, 25.7% of their shots were in the mid-range. It's up to 28% in the playoffs, and both of those are like very, very low numbers relative to the rest of the league. And last year, this also looks like statistically at least somewhat of a Missoula change, because last year, 15th in mid-range in the regular season, went up a little bit in the playoffs as is wont to happen, but over 30%. It's been a 5% drop basically under Missoula versus Udoka.
Yeah, I wonder if that's almost like being able to fight the worst instincts of your players more so than it is encouraging them to do the wrong thing. It's like the players want to take threes and they want to barrel into the basket, and the balance is something you have to coax out of them, and maybe Udoka was just able to do that, and Missoula hasn't been able to. It's interesting. My instinct is to be able to find some sort of big man who can provide a little more versatility, because they basically have their two centers add up to one, with Horford being the spacer and Williams being the rim roller. I wonder if there's some sort of middle ground there where you can get a little more of a scoring center who can do some of that. I know that's an unorthodox like roster building thing at this point, but if it's not a point guard, I would be interested to see if it's that. But we'll have more time to talk about Boston as they actually enter the offseason, whenever that happens. Let's close out with one more game that I took no joy in watching, which was Suns-Nuggets Game 5, and the Denver Nuggets take care of business at home. I don't want to say it was never close, but they really owned this game. Anytime the Suns did make a run, Denver had a very thorough answer. They go into halftime up only 3, and they're up 20 by midway through the third quarter, Chris. So this was the type of checkpoint, I think, if you're watching the Nuggets and wondering if they are different than they were in past seasons. Winning that game that way feels like a pretty major step, where they've had some huge playoff wins, but doing it against Booker and Durant with the pressure sort of on after 2 straight losses, I think I came away really impressed with the Nuggets, and the fact they did it in a really balanced way was extra impressive.
So KD just didn't play well.
Yeah. Correct.
And what was your read on that? Because I kind of thought he had maybe figured out what they were going to throw at him by game 4, and this was not a very emblematic. He had 26, but it felt like a very light 26. It didn't feel
he started
like
1 of 7.
Yeah, just out of sync, out of rhythm, just not getting anything easy. It just, I didn't expect that from KD, in that spot. I'm not even saying he needed to be perfect in a flamethrower and drop 40 or something, but it just didn't feel. It would certainly help the Phoenix Suns if he did that. But like that output from him just felt very off to me, and I didn't feel like they were ever going to have a chance in that game based on just kind of how he settled in early. It just felt kind of really tricky.
Yeah. I don't have a great answer, and I definitely wasn't watching last year's Celtics-Nets series closely enough to build from that through this and try to come up with some grand unifying theory of where he is at in his career. What I will say, having watched all 10 of his playoff games this year very closely, is I think that he might be entering a point in his career where it's unrealistic to expect him to have the ball in his hands to the extent that maybe we saw him have it in 2021, for instance, with that Nets team when Harden was hobbled and Kyrie was out and he was still going toe-to-toe with the Bucks. He had a 32% usage rate in that series and a 25% assist rate. You know, I guess maybe that's just not realistic. I think Aaron Gordon has been really effective on him. I think Bruce Brown and KCP have been able to get the ball loose while he's trying to handle the ball, same way that we saw Russell Westbrook and even Eric Gordon do in the first round. And so I think that's been a real limiting factor for this Suns team, that when Booker is off the floor, when they just want to, they even when they have like what you would think of as a mismatch for Durant, and they just try to go to it and ISO real quick, or like he missed a couple jumpers over Christian Brown early in that. I think it was in the early second quarter when Booker was off the floor. Like, that's a rookie. Like, I understand it's an impressive rookie, but why is he contesting your shots so effectively? I think it's just that little 5 to 10% drop off that we're starting to see with him that is noticeable in those little ways where he's not able to dribble downhill quite as often. He's not going to have as much separation from the players that are guarding him. He's still going to score 25, 30, 35 because he's Kevin Durant, but I think the Suns are really struggling as a result of some of that. Not to mention, they obviously have some clear roster issues, but as we saw in games 3 and 4, if those two are clicking, they can win every game in this series, and when Durant hasn't been at his best, that seems to be what's been enough for the Nuggets to come in there and win it.
The other thing that I felt really switched things in Denver's way was just how physical they were with Booker.
Yeah.
Like KCP's picking him up full court. He's making him work and exert more energy and just grind and grind and grind. And then also kind of getting him involved in defense and kind of targeting him a little bit just to make him expend energy. It's like a very small thing, but it's like the way Booker's played, he's been the best. He's been a flamethrower. He has been the engine of whatever Phoenix is doing. And I think if you're going to say, okay, we can ride you like this and make you expel energy, and KCP is just like willing to spend every minute he's on the court just in his face, that's a really big, that's a good adjustment for Denver to be an irritant, is I believe the quote I saw him use. Like that made a big difference in this game. And, there's ways around it. I think at home, Phoenix probably just is a little more comfortable. I still kind of expect a game 7 here, but they're going to see that again. They're absolutely going to see that again. And there's going to need to be some exerting through it. And whether that's like getting some more stops, whether that is just like just doing some different things to kind of relieve the pressure from the backcourt, whether it's a quick screen or something, that is something they have to know is coming at them again for game 6.
Yeah, KCP, they were trapping him near half court a little bit. KCP and him and Booker each got a foul in the first couple of minutes, just kind of showing how physical things were. And, they were just making it an effort of like, you're not getting easy points early to get into a rhythm. I think Booker was averaging like 10 transition points by himself per game through the first 4, and Michael Malone had continuously cited that stat. That didn't happen, So it's like those are the things that kind of the coaches mean or whatever when we talk about like make it a little bit harder. It's like, well, that's what it looks like in practice. And 8 of 19 from the field, just a little worse, and that was enough. Can we talk about the center matchup?
Can I ask you one other guard question about Phoenix? And just,
Sure.
I want like a yes or no or a shrug.
Okay.
Is Chris Paul going to play in game 6 or what's going on here?
He's not going to play. They announced it today.
Okay. Then I just saw his quotes and then I
he said I'm trying or something like that, but they didn't even go the doubtful route or the questionable route. They ruled him out already, which conversation for a different day, but we might have seen Chris Paul's last game. with the Phoenix Suns in a Game 2 loss on the road, which sucks. But center position. I have two players for you that are that were in the playoffs also this season. And I'm going to ask you if DeAndre Ayton's trade value is higher or lower than those two guys. All right. Higher or lower than Jared Allen?
Lower because he makes way more money.
He makes like $10 million more, but yeah.
That stacks up. Yeah, stacks up.
Yeah. Okay, I probably agree. Is he better or worse than Jared Allen?
I don't know if I feel strongly about that one way or the other.
Okay.
That's a coward's answer.
No, I mean, I think that speaks to it. The fact that they're in the same conversation. One is a number 1 overall pick on a max contract, and the other one was a late first-round pick on a reasonable center contract, you know?
They both have real stretches of, like, apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm just like, I feel like you could exert yourself more. And that's, like, a different thing for Allen. But, like, I mean, Ayton, like, in the series, which is I know where we're going, is, like, just getting, like, Jack Lando's, like, outplaying him and out hustling him, like, every stretch. And it's just like, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah. All right. Mitchell Robinson is the other one.
Again,
he
it's
makes
like
even less than Jared Allen. So
I think in Mitchell Robinson kicked the shit out of Jared Allen. So I might say I would like Mitchell Robinson. It's like 17 versus like 31 for Ayton. Give me the guy at 17. Even with like some of the issues we've seen with Robinson against the Heat, it's like Ayton would probably have some of these similar issues. Like it's just part of being a center in this NBA and having to navigate some of this. And it's like Robinson is just a lot cheaper.
The center spot is super weird. It's like if even Karl Anthony Towns, you don't always know what to do with. Well, that position is in a weird spot. I know he has obvious like IQ and decision making limitations.
Yeah.
I get all that, but like it's a weird place for basketball to have that talented of a dude who's that big, and the league is kind of like, what should we do? Like at any other point in NBA history, that guy would have been a no-brainer plug and play on a good team. And everyone in the league would have wanted him, and now everyone's kind of shrugging their shoulders. And I think Ayton's another good example of that, where it's like he actually sort of plays like you would want a big man too. The problem is he doesn't even do that consistently enough. Like that's the crazy part. If Ayton was just Mitchell Robinson but making too much money, you can live with that. He's not even consistently Mitchell Robinson, you know, and that's the crazy part. So my question there, again, you mentioned he got benched in Game 3. He has been lackluster throughout the whole postseason, coming off of Game 7 where him and the coach get in an argument in game. The Suns don't want to keep him. They eventually sort of have they get pushed to match and bring him back on the deal that he signed with the Pacers. Is there any Andrew Wiggins potential with DeAndre Ayton? Is there any potential that he finds a great team, plugs into the right role, has guys around him to bring the best version of him out of him, and becomes that type of reclamation project that contributes to winning somewhere else? He's contributed to winning fine already, so it's a little different than Wiggins.
Yeah.
But I think he's at a pretty low point right now in terms of his value, his commitment to winning, and just everything. He's playing awful basketball. Is there any chance that happens, that he finds a new place and it turns out good again?
I want to say yes because the optimist in me wants to say yes. I think the hard part is just like finding it for the money, and it's like why would a team necessarily like go out of its way to reclaim a guy in a max contract? That is where it gets really tricky. It's
who's
like,
not a wing like Wiggins, right?
Yeah, Wiggins. It's like, okay, this was like a really high pick with a deep pedigree. Like, and it's also the Warriors, and he's a wing, like you said, and it's like, oh, okay, like all of these things, like, and there were flashes with Wiggins, right? Like, it wasn't like Wiggins' his whole thing was there was nothing there. Like, there were real flashes, kind of under the surface with him a little bit. With Ayton, there have been that, but he's a center, and it's like you could find one who's like 60%, 70% is good for like $8 million. So, like, why would you spend $31 million in draft capital? So unless you like really believe in him, and it's like just some like I mean Toronto. Let's use them as an example. They could use a center, in theory, like long term, but like they traded for Jakob Poeltl, who's going to be like probably a lot cheaper, even if he gets $15 million. That's like $16 other million. That's half of that. Jared Allen is at $20 million. It's $10 million less. That is a close to the mid-level exception worth of money.
Yeah. So Toronto would have been, that was always the one that I was sort of rooting for. As much as I get stressed out watching Ayton play, because I've done it for as long as anyone, like you said, the optimist, you want to root for a good outcome. And that was always the one that I kind of had in my back pocket of something that could really be good for him. But like you said, they got Pirtle. I don't know what their direction is, as we talked about to start the show. They're really kind of doing a reset right now, it seems. The Bulls intrigue me. I think Billy Donovan is a pretty solid coach overall, even if he isn't, maybe the best of the best, and they need a defensive identity, especially as they look past Vucevic. I know there's not really like a great trade there, but just in a vacuum. I think the Hawks, especially with Quinn Snyder, that's always been interesting just from a fit standpoint overall to give Trey a pick and roll partner, but especially now with how Quinn was able to work with Gobert for so long and maximize what Gobert was. Now we've seen Gobert in another circumstance. I think it's fair to say Quinn got a lot out of him. So I guess I just sort of look around and I'm like, there's enough. Dallas fans have been a little intrigued. Oklahoma City fans I've seen have been kind of poking around. If this dude's available, maybe we could do it. There's enough teams that are already over the cap that might need an upgrade there that could just make a trade where it's sort of like salaries for salaries. And I think that's what the Suns are looking at this point. If they do end up shuffling the deck a little bit here and getting something different in that spot, they're probably just looking for, can we get a wing and a forward rotation player? Can we get a guard and a wing rotation player? And you're probably not getting picks. You're probably not getting anybody blue chip. I think there's teams that would do those trades and try to just say, if we could buy really low, maybe we can turn this guy into something. But it's kind of crazy to say that that's where things are. But I would be pretty surprised, even if the Suns maybe win this round or whatever. I think it's at the end. I think the relationship is a problem when you're getting benched in playoff games and there's highlight reels of your poor effort going around after every single game. It's probably over for you in your situation.
Yeah, now I'm trying to find multi-team trades where like I can send Ayton to Atlanta and then like Collins and Capella to Phoenix. And like Chris Paul can just like be sent somewhere else. Yeah, I can go to like the retirement home of the Utah Jazz or something.
Clint Capella is the like MVP of the exact center that everyone brings up when you're talking about that type of center that a championship team wants to just plug in. So it's his destiny. Get him out of Atlanta, who's just like 500. Bring him back to his Rockets years and put him on a great team, and he'll be a cult favorite in like one postseason. He'll just get 20 rebounds. I mean, look what happened with Kevon Looney. Capella would be an icon immediately.
Well, but even just like for a second, Onyeka Okongwu is just like sitting there, like ready for minutes, and then it's like I could just picture the Brad Rowland like annoyance in like the tone of his voice, like talking on Locked On Hawks about like the Hawks use all their assets for DeAndre Ayton and yet they have Onyeka Okongwu at home.
That's true.
It's
well, but it's like there's always going to be the Hornets, right? It's like I know Hornets fans might be interested. Okay, give LaMelo Ball a trade partner or a pick and roll partner in a trade, and then they have Mark Williams. Like there's so many of these young centers that are producing at $5 million, $10 million a year on their rookie deals. It's like, why am I going to rush into bringing a vet in? It's not easy. The Suns have a problem on their hands.
How do you feel about Wendell Carter vis-a-vis DeAndre Ayton?
I think Wendell Carter is just maybe better than DeAndre Ayton. Already.
Yeah, and he's making $14.5 million.
That's the deal you have to do, though. Robert Williams, Wendell Carter, Mitchell Robinson. I mean, I feel bad for those guys because, again, in a past era of the league, they're probably max-type players, and they're just they're DeAndre Jordan, right? They're all three of those guys. I mean, I know Wendell's a little bit different, but, like, Mitchell Robinson's just DeAndre Jordan, but right now he just makes less money because it's 2023. But that's kind of what you got to do. And the Suns, they thought they could get better and pay for better, and it turns out they're kind of in an Andre Drummond situation here with a guy who you have to pay a max for contextual reasons, and now he's not really producing at a winning level for you with what you need him to do. Centers.
DeAndre Ayton to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, I mean Dallas is one. I don't know what they I don't know what they have to trade at this particular moment in time.
Tim Hardaway Jr.
If you could get either Jaden Hardy or Josh Green in that trade, plus Tim Hardaway, we're talking. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of stuff the Suns are going to be looking at. I just think it's interesting. I mean, while Jokic has been amazing, the Suns have been really on the short end of that stick in a pretty bad way. I don't know if anyone could have stopped Jokic from doing that, and we'll get to Jokic as that series goes on. I do want to have that conversation, Chris, too. But Ayton has been one of the big stories, I think. Number 1 overall pick, just sort of laying an egg. That'll wrap us up, though, for this edition of the Just Basketball Show. We'll be back after maybe some Game 7s over the weekend or potentially the start of the conference finals. We'll see. Follow or subscribe wherever you find podcasts. A big thanks to Jalen. I just combined both of their names, Jake and Dillon, for producing. As always, follow us on social media wherever you are. We are there as well. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. And we'll catch you guys next time.